The whole thing started on a rainy Tuesday morning in March 2023. I was sitting in my tiny kitchen, staring at my laptop screen while nursing my third cup of instant coffee. My bank account showed a balance of $247.63, and my rent was due in 4 days. The rejection email from yet another venture capital firm glowed mockingly on my screen, their polite but firm decline of my funding proposal still fresh in my inbox. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. Mom's birthday dinner tonight. Try to look presentable for once. Carmen had always been the successful one in our family. While I was struggling to make ends meet as a freelance graphic designer, she was climbing the corporate ladder at a prestigious marketing firm in downtown Chicago. Her corner office overlooked Lake Michigan, and her salary was probably more than I made in 3 years. She drove a BMW, lived in a penthouse apartment, and never missed an opportunity to remind me of my failures. The birthday dinner was held at Shareholder, one of those expensive French restaurants where the portions are tiny and the prices make your eyes water. Carmen arrived 15 minutes late, as always, making her grand entrance in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She air-kissed our mother and gave me a once-over that lingered disapprovingly on my thrift store blazer. "So, Elena," Carmen said, cutting into her $40 piece of salmon, "still playing around with those little art projects?" "They're not art projects," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm developing a digital platform that connects local artisans with consumers who want authentic handcrafted products." Carmen's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, honey, you really think people want to buy overpriced trinkets from random strangers on the internet? Amazon exists for a reason." Our mother, Maria, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Carmen, be nice to your sister." "I'm being realistic, Mom. Elena's been chasing these impossible dreams for years. Remember the photography business? The jewelry-making phase? The attempted food truck venture?" Carmen counted off my previous endeavors on her manicured fingers. "Face it, Elena. Some people are born to be entrepreneurs, and others are meant to work for people like me." The words stung because they carried a grain of truth. My previous business attempts had failed, each one teaching me painful lessons about market research, financial planning, and the brutal reality of starting from nothing. But this time felt different. This time I had a clear vision and a solid plan. "This is different," I said quietly. "I've spent 2 years researching the market, building relationships with artisans, and developing the technology. I know it can work." Carmen set down her fork and leaned forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "Elena, you're 32 years old. You're living in a studio apartment that's smaller than my walk-in closet. You drive a car that sounds like it's dying every time you start it. When are you going to accept that maybe, just maybe, you're not cut out for this?" The entire restaurant seemed to fall silent. Even the soft jazz music faded into the background as Carmen's words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. "You want to know what I think?" Carmen continued, her voice rising just enough to make nearby diners glance over. "I think you're addicted to failure. You start these grand projects because failing gives you an excuse to stay exactly where you are. It's easier than actually succeeding and having to maintain something." My hands trembled as I reached for my water glass. The condensation felt cool against my palm, grounding me in the moment. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Carmen's smile was cruel. "Name one thing you've ever followed through on. One single thing you've actually succeeded at." The challenge hung between us like a gauntlet thrown down. I could feel my mother's worried gaze, could sense the tension rippling through our small corner of the restaurant. But something inside me hardened, crystallizing into a determination I'd never felt before. "You'll see," I said, my voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "You'll see." Carmen laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. "Oh, Elena, you're gonna build your little craft empire and show me up? Please, you can't even afford to split this dinner check." She wasn't wrong about that last part. I had exactly enough money in my checking account to cover my portion of the meal with maybe $20 left over. But as I sat there, Watching my sister's smug expression, I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I woke up before dawn and pulled out a notebook I'd been keeping for months. It was filled with sketches, business plans, contact information for artisans I'd met at craft fairs, and detailed notes about market gaps I'd identified. My platform, which I'd named Artisans Bridge, wasn't just another e-commerce site. It was a carefully designed ecosystem that would provide marketing support, quality assurance, and fair pricing for independent creators, while giving consumers access to unique, story-driven products. I'd already built a prototype website using every coding skill I'd taught myself over the past 2 years. The interface was clean and intuitive, with detailed artisan profiles, product stories, and a rating system that emphasized craftsmanship and authenticity over mass appeal. I'd even secured preliminary agreements with 37 artisans across the Midwest, each one eager to reach a broader audience. But I needed funding. My savings account was practically empty, and traditional loans were out of the question given my irregular income and non-existent credit history. I'd been rejected by 12 venture capital firms, 8 angel investors, and even my own bank when I'd asked for a small business loan. That's when I remembered something my college roommate had mentioned years ago. Sophia Chen had always been interested in alternative funding methods, and she'd once told me about a growing trend of community-based investment platforms. People with small amounts of money could pool their resources to support businesses they believed in, creating a democratic approach to venture capital. I spent the entire day researching these platforms, learning about equity crowdfunding, revenue-sharing agreements, and the legal requirements for soliciting investment from non-accredited investors. The regulations were complex, but there was a path forward if I was willing to navigate it carefully. By evening, I had drafted a comprehensive business plan that included financial projections, market analysis, and a detailed explanation of how Artisans Bridge would differentiate itself from existing platforms. I outlined a funding goal of $50,000, which would be enough to properly launch the platform, hire a part-time customer service representative, and invest in marketing to reach our target audience. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of coffee, coding, and constant refinement. I reached out to every artisan I'd met, asking them to contribute testimonials and product samples for the crowdfunding campaign. I created detailed video presentations explaining the platform's value proposition, and recorded dozens of interviews with potential users. Marcus Thompson, a woodworker from Wisconsin who specialized in custom furniture, became one of my earliest supporters. He'd been struggling to reach customers beyond his local market, and the idea of a platform that could showcase his craftsmanship to a national audience excited him immensely. "You know what the problem is with most online marketplaces?" Marcus said during one of our video calls. "They treat handmade goods like they're competing with factory products. They emphasize speed and low prices instead of quality and story. Your platform gets it. You understand that people who want authentic craftsmanship are willing to pay for it and wait for it." Isabella Martinez, a textile artist from New Mexico, echoed similar sentiments. She'd been selling her hand-woven scarves and wall hangings at local galleries, but the commissions were eating into her profits, and she had no way to build a consistent customer base. "The gallery takes 40%, and I never get to interact with the people who buy my work," she explained. "They don't know the story behind each piece, the traditional techniques I learned from my grandmother, or the significance of the patterns I use. Your platform would let me share all of that." These conversations reinforced my belief that there was a real market for Artisans Bridge. Consumers were increasingly interested in supporting small businesses and learning about the origins of their purchases. The rise of social media had created an appetite for authentic stories and personal connections that traditional retail couldn't satisfy. I launched the crowdfunding campaign on a platform called Community Fund, which specialized in supporting local and regional businesses. The campaign video featured interviews with artisans, demonstrations of their work, and a walkthrough of the platform's features. I set a goal of $50,000 over 60 days, with various reward tiers for different investment levels. The first week was agonizing. Despite sharing the campaign across all my social media channels and sending emails to everyone I knew, we only raised $3,247. The platform's algorithm seemed to favor campaigns that gained momentum quickly, and I worried that our slow start would doom us to invisibility. But then, something unexpected happened. Marcus shared the campaign with his woodworking community, and suddenly we had dozens of craftspeople promoting Artisans Bridge to their own networks. Isabella's gallery connections began sharing the campaign with art collectors and craft enthusiasts. The story began to spread organically, passed along by people who understood the value of what we were trying to build. By the end of the second week, we'd raised $18,000. The momentum was building, and I started receiving messages from artisans across the country who wanted to join the platform. A ceramicist from Oregon, a metalworker from Tennessee, a fiber artist from Maine. Each one brought their own network of supporters and their own unique story. The campaign became more than just a funding effort, it became a movement. People weren't just investing money. They were investing in a vision of commerce that prioritized authenticity, craftsmanship, and human connection over efficiency and profit margins. Carmen, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware of what was happening. She'd returned to her high-powered job and her expensive lifestyle, probably forgetting about our dinner conversation entirely. She had no idea that her little sister was building something that would soon change both of their lives forever. The crowdfunding campaign hit $35,000 on day 37, but the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Amanda Foster, a professor of cultural anthropology at Northwestern University, had been following the campaign through her research on traditional crafts and modern commerce. She reached out to me on a Thursday afternoon while I was debugging the payment processing system. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Elena, I've been watching your project with great interest, she said during our video call. What you're building aligns perfectly with research I've been conducting on the cultural significance of handmade goods in contemporary society. Dr. Foster's endorsement came with something even more valuable than academic credibility: access to her network of colleagues, students, and cultural institutions. She offered to feature Artisans Bridge in her upcoming paper on digital platforms preserving traditional crafts, which would be published in the Journal of Cultural Economics. There's something else, she continued. I know someone who might be interested in your platform from an investment perspective. Have you heard of Rebecca Walsh? I hadn't, but a quick internet search revealed that Rebecca Walsh was a former tech executive who had founded 3 successful companies before turning to angel investing. She specialized in platforms that connected communities and had a particular interest in supporting female entrepreneurs. Dr. Foster arranged an introduction, and Rebecca agreed to a meeting the following week. I spent days preparing, refining my pitch deck, and rehearsing responses to every possible question. The meeting was set for her office in downtown Chicago, just 12 blocks from where Carmen worked. Rebecca's office occupied the entire top floor of a converted warehouse, with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. She was younger than I'd expected, probably in her early 40s, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of confident presence that commanded attention without demanding it. "Tell me about your artisans," she said after I'd finished my formal presentation. "Not the business metrics. Tell me about the people." I talked about Marcus and his furniture that was built to last generations, about Isabella and her connection to ancestral weaving techniques, about David Kim in Oregon who threw pottery using clay from a deposit his grandfather had discovered in the 1960s. Rebecca listened intently, occasionally asking questions that revealed she understood both the technical and emotional aspects of what I was building. "You're not just creating a marketplace," she said finally, "you're preserving something important. In 10 years, when mass production has made everything identical, these artisans will be carrying forward traditions that might otherwise disappear." Rebecca offered to invest $75,000 in exchange for a 15% equity stake, contingent on the crowdfunding campaign reaching its goal. Her investment would provide the additional capital needed to scale operations, hire staff, and implement the advanced features that would set Artisans Bridge apart from competitors. The crowdfunding campaign closed on day 58, with $52,347 raised from 1,247 backers. Combined with Rebecca's investment, I had enough capital to transform Artisans Bridge from a promising prototype into a fully operational platform. Launch day arrived on a crisp October morning. I'd spent the previous week in a blur of final testing, content creation, and coordination with our initial group of 49 artisans. The platform went live at 6 a.m. Central Time, and I sat in my studio apartment hitting refresh on the analytics dashboard every few minutes. The first sale came at 6:23 a.m., a set of ceramic mugs from David Kim, purchased by a customer in Portland who had learned about the platform through our social media campaign. By noon, we had processed 37 orders totaling $1,847. By the end of the week, we had facilitated $8,932 in transactions and gained 14 new artisan partners. But the real validation came from the customer feedback. People weren't just buying products, they were connecting with the stories behind them. Sarah Mitchell from Denver wrote a review about the hand-forged garden tools she'd purchased from a blacksmith in Vermont. These aren't just tools, they're pieces of art that happen to be functional. Knowing that they were made by someone who learned the craft from his father makes using them feel like participating in history. The platform's growth exceeded every projection I'd made. By the end of November, we had processed over $50,000 in sales and expanded to include 78 artisans across 23 states. The success attracted attention from trade publications, lifestyle blogs, and even a feature story in Midwest Living magazine. I hired Jenny Patterson, a recent marketing graduate from DePaul University, as our first full-time employee. Her enthusiasm for the project was infectious, and she brought fresh ideas about social media strategy and influencer partnerships. Together, we developed campaigns that showcased the artisans' processes, from raw materials to finished products, giving customers insight into the skill and time invested in each piece. Thomas Rivera, a leatherworker from Texas, became one of our most successful partners. His handmade belts and bags were already popular locally, but Artisan's Bridge gave him access to customers who valued quality over convenience. His monthly sales through the platform quickly surpassed what he'd been making through his physical workshop. "I've been doing this for 15 years, Thomas told me during one of our regular check-ins. "I never thought I'd be shipping orders to places like Alaska and Hawaii. Your platform has changed my entire business model." The holiday season brought unexpected challenges and opportunities. Orders flooded in faster than some artisans could fulfill them, forcing us to implement new inventory management systems and communication protocols. I worked 18-hour days coordinating with suppliers, troubleshooting technical issues, and personally responding to customer inquiries. One particularly stressful evening in December, I was debugging a payment processing error when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number, and I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Elena, mija, you sound exhausted," my mother said. "Are you taking care of yourself?" "I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with the business." "Carmen mentioned she saw an article about your platform in some magazine. She seemed surprised that it was actually working." I felt a flash of satisfaction at the thought of Carmen's surprise, but it was tempered by the realization that I'd been so focused on building the business that I'd barely thought about proving anything to her. The validation I'd once craved from my sister had been replaced by something more meaningful, the knowledge that Artisan's Bridge was creating real value for real people. "It's going well," I said simply. "Better than I expected, actually." "I'm proud of you, Elena. Your father would be proud too." The mention of my father, who had passed away 3 years earlier, brought tears to my eyes. He'd been a carpenter who took pride in his craftsmanship, and I knew he would have loved what I was building. He would have understood the value of connecting skilled artisans with appreciative customers. As the new year approached, I received a call from Janet Morrison, a business reporter from the Chicago Tribune. She was working on a story about successful local startups and wanted to include Artisan's Bridge in her piece. The interview lasted over an hour, covering everything from the platform's inception to our plans for expansion. "What's next for Artisan's Bridge?" she asked as we wrapped up. I thought about the international artisans who had been contacting us, the corporate partnerships we were exploring, and the mobile app that was in development. But more than that, I thought about the community we were building and the traditional crafts we were helping preserve. "We're planning to expand internationally," I said. "There are incredible artisans all over the world who are struggling to reach global markets. We want to be the bridge that connects them with customers who value authentic craftsmanship." The Tribune article was published on January 15th, accompanied by professional photos of me in the small office space we'd rented in a converted warehouse. The piece highlighted our growth metrics, our impact on local artisans, and the platform's role in preserving traditional crafts. I was having coffee with Jenny that morning when she showed me something on her phone. Carmen had shared the Tribune article on her LinkedIn profile with a comment. "Proud of my sister Elena Rodriguez for building something amazing. #entrepreneurship, #family support." Jenny looked up from her phone with a grin. "I'm guessing this is the sister you mentioned." "That's her," I said, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Part of me was pleased by Carmen's public recognition, but another part wondered if her support would have meant more during the difficult early days when I'd needed it most. The platform continued to grow throughout the winter and into spring. We implemented new features based on customer feedback, including artisan video profiles, custom order capabilities, and a subscription box service that introduced customers to different craftspeople each month. Our team expanded to include a customer service representative, a part-time graphic designer, and a warehouse coordinator who managed the logistics of our growing operations. By May, we had processed over $300,000 in sales and were working with 127 artisans across 31 states. The platform had become profitable, and we were discussing plans for a Series A funding round to accelerate expansion. But the real measure of success wasn't in the numbers, it was in the stories. Like Maria Santos, a grandmother from Arizona who had started weaving baskets to stay active after retirement, and now had a thriving business that supported her entire family. Or Jonathan Wright, a young father from Ohio who had turned his woodworking hobby into a full-time career that let him work from home while his wife pursued her medical degree. These stories reminded me why I'd started Artisans Bridge in the first place. It wasn't about proving Carmen wrong or achieving some arbitrary definition of success. It was about creating a platform that honored the value of human craftsmanship and connected people across distances through shared appreciation for quality and authenticity. The call from First National Bank came on a Tuesday morning in June, almost exactly 15 months after that disastrous dinner with Carmen. I was in the middle of a strategy meeting with Ginny and our new operations manager when my phone rang. "Ms. Rodriguez? This is Mr. Davidson from First National Bank. I believe you have an account with us?" I did have an account with First National, the same checking account where my balance had once dipped below $300. But I couldn't imagine why the bank manager would be calling me personally. "Yes, I have an account there," I said, stepping out of the meeting room for privacy. "I'm calling because we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. There's been some confusion regarding your account status, and I think it would be best if we could meet in person to discuss it." The cryptic nature of his request made me nervous. Had there been some kind of fraud? Was there an issue with our business banking relationship? I agreed to meet him that afternoon, spending the rest of the morning wondering what could possibly require such urgency. As I stood in the elevator of First National Bank, rising toward the executive floor, I thought about how much had changed since I'd last worried about my account balance. But nothing could have prepared me for what Mr. Davidson was about to tell me. Mr. Davidson's office was nothing like I'd expected. The mahogany desk was imposing, yes, but the walls were covered with photographs of local businesses he'd helped finance over the years. A small pottery vase sat on his windowsill. Handmade, I noticed, with the kind of subtle imperfections that spoke of human craftsmanship rather than machine production. "Please, sit down, Ms. Rodriguez," he said, gesturing to a leather chair across from his desk. "I have to admit, this is quite an unusual situation for me." He opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents that I recognized as banking statements and corporate filings. My stomach tightened as I tried to guess what kind of problem could require this level of formality. "First, let me ask you something," Mr. Davidson continued. "Are you familiar with the investment activities of Miss Carmen Rodriguez?" The question caught me completely off guard. "Carmen, she's my sister. Why would you ask about her?" Mr. Davidson's expression shifted to something between surprise and concern. "You're telling me you don't know about her investment portfolio with us? Her private banking relationship? I know she makes good money at her marketing firm, but we don't really discuss finances," I said, feeling increasingly confused. "What does this have to do with my account?" He leaned back in his chair and studied me for a long moment. "Ms. Rodriguez, your sister has been one of our most active private clients for the past 2 years. She's built a substantial investment portfolio, and she's been particularly interested in emerging technology companies and small business ventures." I felt like I was missing something fundamental. Carmen had never mentioned anything about investing, and during our family dinners, she always seemed focused on her corporate job and the latest office politics. The idea of her as a serious investor didn't align with what I knew about her interests or expertise. "I'm sorry, but I still don't understand why you're telling me this," I said. Mr. Davidson pulled out another document, one I'd never seen before. "Because 6 months ago, your sister invested $250,000 in Artisans Bridge LLC. She's currently your largest individual shareholder after Ms. Walsh's venture capital firm." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at the document, seeing Carmen's signature and the corporate seal, but unable to process what it meant. Carmen had invested in my company? Carmen, who had mocked my business plans and predicted my failure. "That's impossible," I whispered. "She doesn't even believe in what I'm doing." "According to our records, she's been following your company's progress very closely. She requested quarterly reports, attended board meetings virtually, and even provided strategic input on your expansion plans. Her investment was structured to remain anonymous at her specific request." My mind raced through the past months, looking for signs I'd missed. The board meetings had been conducted through our corporate attorney, with investors participating through a conference system that maintained anonymity. I'd assumed all the strategic suggestions were coming from Rebecca Walsh's team, but now I realized that some of the most insightful questions had come from an unidentified participant who seemed to understand both traditional marketing and emerging digital trends. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Because your sister has made another decision that affects your company significantly. She's chosen to exercise her conversion rights and increase her stake in Artisans Bridge. Her additional investment of $500,000 will make her the majority shareholder, which requires disclosure to all parties involved." The room seemed to spin around me. Carmen hadn't just invested in my company, she was about to become my business partner, my boss, effectively. The sister who had humiliated me at dinner 18 months ago was now in a position to control the company I'd built from nothing. "There's more," Mr. Davidson continued gently. "She's also requested that the anonymity provision be lifted. She wants to meet with you directly to discuss the future of the business." I left the bank in a daze, walking the 12 blocks to Carmen's office building without really seeing the city around me. The security guard in the lobby recognized me from previous visits and waved me through to the elevator bank. I rode up to the 32nd floor in silence, my mind churning with questions and emotions I couldn't begin to untangle. Carmen's assistant, a young man named Kevin, looked surprised to see me. "Elena, Carmen didn't mention you were coming by. She's in a meeting with the Peterson account, but I can interrupt if it's urgent." "It's urgent," I said. Kevin disappeared into Carmen's office, and I could hear muffled voices through the heavy door. After a few minutes, 3 executives in expensive suits emerged, nodding politely as they passed. Carmen appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Come in," she said simply. Her office was exactly as I remembered, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake, awards and accolades displayed on built-in shelves, and a conference table that could seat 12 people. But now I noticed details I'd missed before. A small wooden sculpture that I recognized as Marcus Thompson's work, a framed photograph of Isabella Martinez's textile art, and a leather portfolio that looked suspiciously like something Thomas Rivera might have crafted. "I suppose Mr. Davidson told you about the investment," Carmen said, settling into her chair behind the massive desk. "Why?" The question came out as barely more than a whisper. Carmen was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the lake. "Do you remember what Dad used to say about his carpentry work? He'd tell us that the measure of good craftsmanship wasn't whether something looked perfect from a distance, but whether it would still be standing 50 years later." I nodded, not trusting my voice to remain steady. "I've spent the last 8 years climbing the corporate ladder, Elena." I make more money than I know what to do with, I have a title that impresses people at cocktail parties, and I've achieved everything I thought I wanted. But at the end of the day, I'm helping companies sell products that will be obsolete in 2 years to people who don't really need them. She turned back to face me, and I saw something in her expression that I'd never seen before: vulnerability. When you told me about Artisan's Bridge at Mom's birthday dinner, I thought it was just another one of your pipe dreams, but then I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept imagining Dad's reaction to what you were trying to build. He would have loved it, Elena. He would have understood that you weren't just creating a business. You were preserving something important. So why did you invest anonymously, I asked. Why not just tell me you believed in it? Carmen's laugh was self-deprecating, because I'd already made such a fool of myself at dinner. I'd been so cruel, so dismissive. I couldn't face the possibility that you might reject my help, or worse, that you might accept it out of pity. I wanted to support what you were building, but I also wanted to prove to myself that it could succeed without my influence. She stood up and walked to the window, her back to me. I've been watching your progress through the quarterly reports. The growth metrics are impressive, but what really struck me were the customer testimonials and artisan stories. You're not just running a business, Elena. You're creating a community. You're giving people a way to connect with authentic craftsmanship in a world that's increasingly artificial. I felt tears building in my eyes, but I forced myself to ask the question that had been haunting me since leaving the bank. What happens now? Are you going to take over the company, change everything I've built? Carmen turned around, and I saw that her eyes were also bright with unshed tears. I don't want to take over anything. I want to help you scale it. I want to use my experience in marketing and business development to help Artisan's Bridge reach more people, support more artisans, and preserve more traditional crafts. But you'll be the majority shareholder, I said. You'll have control. Only on paper, Carmen replied. I've already had our corporate attorney draft documents that will ensure you retain operational control and decision-making authority. I'm investing in your vision, Elena, not trying to replace it with my own. The conversation continued for another hour, covering everything from expansion plans to family dynamics to the guilt Carmen had been carrying since that dinner 18 months ago. She told me about the sleepless nights she'd spent after our argument, about the research she'd done into traditional crafts and artisan economics, about the pride she'd felt when she saw the Tribune article about Artisan's Bridge's success. I know I can't undo what I said that night, Carmen said as we prepared to leave, but I hope I can prove that I believe in you now. Not just as your sister, but as a business partner and an investor. Walking back to my office, I felt like I was seeing the city with new eyes. The revelation about Carmen's investment had shifted something fundamental in my understanding of the past year. All those anonymous strategic suggestions, all those insightful questions during board meetings, all those moments when I'd felt like someone truly understood what I was trying to build, that had been Carmen, supporting me from the shadows while I struggled to prove myself. Jenny was waiting in the office when I arrived, practically vibrating with excitement. Elena, you're not going to believe what just happened. I just got off the phone with someone from Good Morning America. They want to do a segment on Artisan's Bridge for their Small Business Spotlight series. The timing felt surreal. Just hours after discovering my sister's secret support, the platform was about to receive national television exposure. I told Jenny about the bank meeting and Carmen's investment, watching her expressions cycle through surprise, confusion, and finally, understanding. So your sister, the one who said you'd never succeed, has actually been your biggest supporter this whole time? Jenny asked. It's more complicated than that, I said. But yes, essentially. That's either the most twisted or the most beautiful family story I've ever heard, Jenny said with a grin. Probably both. The Good Morning America segment was scheduled for the following week, which meant we had 6 days to prepare for what could be a pivotal moment in Artisan's Bridge's growth. National television exposure would bring thousands of new customers to the platform, but it would also require us to be ready for a massive surge in orders and inquiries. I spent the weekend with Carmen, planning the logistics of scaling up our operations. Her experience in managing large marketing campaigns proved invaluable as we worked through scenarios for different levels of response. We arranged for temporary customer service support, coordinated with our warehouse partners to ensure adequate inventory, and prepared communication templates for the inevitable influx of new artisan applications. Working together felt strange at first. For so many years, Carmen had been the successful older sister while I struggled to find my direction. Now we were collaborating as equals, each bringing different strengths to solve complex problems. Carmen's analytical approach complemented my creative vision, and her network of professional contacts opened doors that would have taken me years to approach on my own. The television appearance went better than I'd dared to hope. The segment ran for nearly 4 minutes, featuring interviews with me and 2 of our artisans, along with beautiful footage of handmade products being created and shipped. The host, Sarah Chen, seemed genuinely enthusiastic about the platform's mission and asked exactly the right questions to showcase what made Artisans Bridge special. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours of the broadcast, we had received over 3,000 new customer registrations and 127 applications from prospective artisans. Orders flooded in faster than our systems could process them, and our customer service phone line was completely overwhelmed. But we were ready. Carmen had coordinated with a customer service outsourcing company to provide temporary support, and our warehouse partners had prepared for the surge. What could have been a disaster became a celebration of the platform's growth and potential. Marcus Thompson called me that evening, his voice filled with excitement. "Elena, I've gotten more orders today than I typically see in a month. I'm going to have to hire my nephew to help with production just to keep up." Similar calls came from artisans across the country. Isabella Martinez had sold out of her entire inventory within 6 hours of the broadcast. David Kim was fielding custom orders from customers who had seen his pottery featured in the segment. The platform wasn't just growing, it was transforming the lives of the craftspeople who depended on it. As I sat in my office that night, watching the order numbers climb on my computer screen, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The path from that humiliating dinner to national television success had been longer and more complex than I could have imagined, full of surprises and revelations that had changed not just my business, but my understanding of family and success itself. The biggest surprise of all was still to come. 3 months after the Good Morning America segment, I was standing in the conference room of Preston & Associates, the most prestigious law firm in Chicago, staring at documents that would change everything once again. The mahogany table was covered with contracts, financial statements, and legal briefs that represented the culmination of negotiations I never could have imagined when I first launched Artisans Bridge. "The offer is unprecedented for a company of your size and age," said Michael Preston himself, the senior partner who typically handled only the firm's most significant corporate clients. Global Craft Industries is willing to pay $12.8 million for a complete acquisition of Artisans Bridge, with additional performance bonuses that could bring the total to $18 million over 3 years. Carmen sat beside me, her expression carefully neutral as she reviewed the terms. Over the past months, our working relationship had evolved into something neither of us had expected, a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and complementary skills. She handled the business development and strategic planning, while I focused on platform development and artisan relationships. Global Craft Industries was exactly the kind of corporate entity I'd hoped to avoid when starting Artisans Bridge. They owned dozens of e-commerce platforms, manufacturing facilities in 12 countries, and a distribution network that reached virtually every major retailer in North America. Their interest in acquiring my platform had emerged after the television appearance generated industry attention we'd never anticipated. What would happen to the artisans? I asked the question that had been haunting me since the acquisition discussions began. Michael Preston exchanged a glance with the Global Craft representatives before responding. "The acquiring company has committed to maintaining the existing artisan relationships for a minimum of 18 months. After that period, they would have discretion to optimize the platform according to market conditions." The euphemistic language couldn't disguise what optimize according to market conditions really meant. Global Craft would gradually shift the platform toward mass-produced items that offered higher profit margins and faster delivery times. The handmade pottery would be replaced by factory ceramics. The custom furniture would give way to assembly line products. Everything that made Artisans Bridge special would be diluted until it became indistinguishable from any other e-commerce site. "I need some time to think about this," I said, gathering the documents. Outside the law firm, Carmen and I walked toward Grant Park without speaking. The September afternoon was perfect. Warm, but not humid, with a breeze coming off the lake that carried hints of the changing season. Families were scattered across the grass, children playing while parents relaxed in the sunshine. It was the kind of day that made Chicago feel like the best city in the world. $12.8 million, Carmen said finally. That's life-changing money, Elena. You could retire tomorrow and never worry about anything financial ever again. She was right, of course. The acquisition offer represented more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. Even after taxes and investor payouts, my share would be enough to buy a house, travel the world, or start any number of new ventures. I could pursue any dream without worrying about rent money or grocery bills. But it would destroy everything we've built, I said. Marcus Thompson didn't partner with us so his furniture could compete with IKEA. Isabella Martinez didn't share her grandmother's weaving techniques so they could be mass-produced in a factory. Carmen nodded slowly. I know, but we also have to consider the reality of running an independent platform in a market dominated by giants. Amazon, Etsy, eBay. They all have resources we can't match. Maybe being part of a larger company would give us the stability to actually preserve what we've created. We found a bench overlooking the lake and sat down to watch the sailboats navigating the choppy water. A young couple was flying a kite nearby, laughing as they struggled to keep it aloft in the shifting wind. Their joy was infectious, a reminder that success could be measured in moments of happiness rather than just financial metrics. Do you remember what you said to me that night at Mom's birthday dinner? I asked Carmen. She winced slightly. I said a lot of terrible things that night. You asked me to name one thing I'd ever followed through on, one single thing I'd actually succeeded at. Elena, No, let me finish. At the time, I couldn't answer that question. I had this long list of projects I'd started and abandoned, dreams I'd given up on when they got difficult. But now I know what I should have said. I turned to face her directly. I followed through on believing that craftsmanship matters. I succeeded at creating a space where people who make beautiful things with their hands can connect with people who value that beauty. I built something that honors the work our father did, the pride he took in creating objects that would outlast him. Carmen's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. $12.8 million is a lot of money, I continued. But if I take that money and let Global Craft destroy what we've built, then I'll have failed at the one thing that really matters. I'll have proven that everything can be bought, that no dream is worth preserving if someone offers enough cash to make it disappear. That evening, I called an emergency meeting with our key artisans. We gathered via video conference, faces filling my laptop screen from workshops and studios across the country. Marcus Thompson appeared to be in his garage, wood shavings visible on his workbench behind him. Isabella Martinez was in her weaving room, colorful threads creating a tapestry backdrop. David Kim had his potter's wheel in view, clay dust on his apron. I want to be completely transparent with all of you, I began. We've received an acquisition offer that would fundamentally change Artisans Bridge. Before I make any decisions, I need to know how you feel about the platform's future. I explained the Global Craft offer without revealing the specific financial terms, focusing instead on what the acquisition would mean for the artisan community we'd built. The responses were immediate and passionate. I didn't join this platform to become a vendor for some corporate machine, said Thomas Rivera, his voice tight with emotion. I joined because you understood that leatherwork is an art form, not just a manufacturing process. Marcus Thompson leaned forward into his camera. Elena, I've been doing woodworking for 30 years. I've seen what happens when big companies get involved in traditional crafts. They squeeze out everything that makes them special until you're left with something that looks handmade but has no soul. One by one, the artisans shared similar sentiments. They talked about the relationships they'd built with customers through the platform, the pride they felt in preserving traditional techniques, and the fear that corporate ownership would reduce their work to just another product category. What if we could find another way? Asked Sarah Coleman, a textile artist from North Carolina who had joined the platform just 2 months earlier. What if instead of selling to a corporation, we could find investors who actually understand what we're trying to preserve? The idea sparked a discussion that lasted nearly 3 hours. We talked about alternative funding models, cooperative ownership structures, and ways to scale the platform without compromising its mission. By the end of the call, we had the outline of a plan that none of us had considered before. The next morning, I met with Rebecca Walsh at her office. She listened carefully as I explained the global craft offer and the artisan's response, taking notes on a legal pad and occasionally asking clarifying questions. "You're thinking about turning down $12.8 million, she said when I finished. "That's either the most principled decision I've ever witnessed, or complete financial suicide." "Maybe both," I admitted, "but I have an alternative proposal." I laid out the plan that had emerged from the artisan meeting. Instead of selling to Global Craft, we would raise additional capital from impact investors who shared our mission of preserving traditional crafts. The funding would allow us to expand internationally, develop new platform features, and provide additional support services for artisans without compromising our core values. We'd be looking for investors who measure success in terms of artisan livelihoods supported and traditional skills preserved, not just profit margins, I explained. People who understand that some things are worth more than their market value. Rebecca was quiet for several minutes, reviewing the financial projections and growth plans I'd prepared. Finally, she looked up with a smile I'd never seen before, part admiration, part excitement, and part disbelief. "You know what? I think you're crazy enough to pull this off. I know at least 6 impact investors who would be interested in this kind of opportunity. Give me 2 weeks to make some calls." The Global Craft representatives were not pleased when I declined their offer. The lead negotiator, a sharp-suited executive named Bradley Morrison, seemed genuinely confused by my decision. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm not sure you understand the full implications of what you're rejecting," he said during our final meeting. "Opportunities like this don't come along often, especially for companies in your sector." "I understand completely," I replied. "I'm choosing a mission over money." Bradley shook his head as he packed up his briefcase. "In 5 years, when you're struggling to compete against platforms with unlimited resources, you'll regret this decision." 6 months later, I was standing in front of the Chicago Cultural Center, watching a line of people stretch around the block. The first annual Artisans Bridgemakers Festival had drawn over 15,000 visitors to celebrate traditional crafts and the artists who preserved them. Local news crews were interviewing customers and artisans, capturing the energy and passion that defined our community. Marcus Thompson had driven down from Wisconsin with a truck full of furniture, and his booth was surrounded by customers admiring his craftsmanship. Isabella Martinez was demonstrating traditional weaving techniques while explaining the cultural significance of her patterns. David Kim had set up a pottery wheel and was teaching children how to shape clay with their hands. Carmen found me near the main stage, where a bluegrass band was performing on instruments crafted by our platform's musical artisans. She handed me a local newspaper with a front-page photo of the festival and a headline that read, "Local Platform Celebrates Artisan Renaissance." "The impact investor funding came through this morning," she said. $2.4 million from 7 different investors, all committed to our mission-driven approach. The funding would allow us to expand into Europe and Asia, connecting with traditional craftspeople whose techniques stretched back centuries. We were planning partnerships with cultural preservation organizations, craft schools, and museums that shared our commitment to keeping traditional skills alive. "Any regrets about the Global Craft money?" Carmen asked. I looked around at the festival, at families learning about traditional crafts, at artisans sharing their knowledge and passion, at a community that had grown far beyond anything I'd originally envisioned. Children were trying their hands at pottery wheels and weaving looms, learning skills their great-grandparents would have recognized. "None whatsoever," I said. "Some things are worth more than money." That evening, our family gathered for dinner at the same restaurant where Carmen had delivered her crushing verdict 18 months earlier. But this time, we were celebrating rather than arguing. Our mother beamed with pride as she showed everyone photos from the festival on her phone. Carmen raised her glass in a toast that acknowledged both our professional partnership and our restored relationship as sisters. "To Elena," she said, "who proved that success isn't just about making money, it's about making a difference." As we clinked glasses, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The path from that humiliating dinner to this celebration had been filled with challenges I never could have anticipated, revelations that changed everything I thought I knew about family and ambition, and choices that defined not just my business but my values. The platform had grown beyond my wildest dreams, supporting hundreds of artisans and connecting them with customers who valued authenticity over convenience. But more than that, it had preserved something precious: the knowledge that human hands could create beauty that no machine could replicate, and that there were still people willing to pay for that irreplaceable value. Outside the restaurant, Chicago's skyline glittered in the darkness, a testament to human ambition and achievement. But I knew that somewhere in the city, in workshops and studios scattered across the country, artisans were working by lamplight, preserving traditions that connected us to our past while creating beauty for the future. That connection, between past and present, between maker and customer, between dream and reality, was worth more than any acquisition offer. It was the true measure of success, and it belonged to all of us who had chosen to build something meaningful, rather than just profitable. The sister who had once said I'd never succeed had become my greatest supporter and business partner. The platform I'd built to prove her wrong had evolved into something far more important: a bridge between traditional craftsmanship and modern commerce, preserving the irreplaceable value of human creativity in an increasingly automated world. And sometimes, late at night when I was reviewing artisan applications or planning new platform features, I could almost hear my father's voice reminding me that the best craftsmanship wasn't about perfection. It was about building something that would still be standing 50 years later. 2 years after rejecting the Global Craft acquisition, I stood in the departure lounge of Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, watching the sunrise paint the runway in shades of gold and amber. My phone buzzed with notifications from Artisans Bridge, new orders, artisan applications, and customer reviews that continued to pour in 24 hours a day from around the world. The European expansion had exceeded every projection we'd made. Our partnership with the French Ministry of Culture had opened doors to traditional craftspeople across the continent. From Venetian glassblowers to Norwegian woodcarvers to Scottish textile artists, each new artisan brought unique techniques and cultural heritage that enriched the platform's offerings. Flight 447 to Tokyo is now boarding, announced the gate agent in accented English. I gathered my laptop bag and the carefully wrapped pottery piece I was carrying as a gift for our Japanese partners. The next phase of expansion would take us into Asia, where we'd already established relationships with ceramic artists in Kyoto, metalworkers in Seoul, and textile artists in rural villages throughout Southeast Asia. Carmen met me at Narita Airport, having flown in from a meeting with potential investors in Hong Kong. Our business partnership had evolved to the point where we could coordinate complex international operations across multiple time zones, each leveraging our strengths to build something neither of us could have achieved alone. "How did the ministry meeting go?" she asked, as we navigated through the crowded terminal. "Better than expected. The Japanese government is launching a cultural preservation initiative next year, and they want Artisans Bridge to be their primary international partner. We're talking about supporting over 300 traditional craftspeople in the first year alone." The taxi ride into Tokyo gave us time to discuss the numbers that had been accumulating during our respective flights. The platform now supported 847 artisans across 23 countries, with gross sales approaching $4.2 million annually. More importantly, we documented the preservation of 127 traditional craft techniques that had been at risk of disappearing, and our educational partnership with universities had created apprenticeship programs that were training the next generation of artisans. Our hotel was in the Asakusa district, chosen specifically for its proximity to traditional craft workshops that had been operating for generations. That evening, we visited the studio of Master Takeshi Yamamoto, a potter whose family had been creating ceremonial tea vessels for over 4 centuries. Master Yamamoto's workshop was a study in controlled chaos. Clay in various stages of preparation, filled wooden shelves, and kilns of different sizes occupied every available corner. The walls were lined with pieces that represented decades of refinement, each one slightly different but unmistakably the product of the same artistic vision. "In Japan, we have a concept called shokunin," Master Yamamoto explained through our translator, a young woman named Akiko who worked for the cultural ministry. "It refers to the craftsman's spirit, the relentless pursuit of perfection in one's craft, not for recognition or profit, but for the inherent value of the work itself." He demonstrated his technique on the potter's wheel, his hands moving with the kind of unconscious precision that comes only from decades of practice. The clay seemed to respond to his touch, forming elegant curves that would have taken me hours to achieve with conscious effort. Your platform understands this principle, he continued. You create space for shokunin to flourish, without demanding that they compromise their standards for commercial success. The next morning, we met with representatives from the Japan Traditional Crafts Association in a conference room that overlooked the Imperial Palace Gardens. The association's president, Mrs. Keiko Sato, presented us with a formal partnership proposal that would establish Artisans Bridge as the official international marketplace for certified Japanese traditional crafts. This partnership represents more than a business opportunity, Mrs. Sato explained. It acknowledges your platform's commitment to preserving cultural heritage while adapting to modern commerce. The financial terms were substantial. The association would guarantee minimum monthly sales volumes while providing quality certification and cultural education content. But more significant was the symbolic recognition that Artisans Bridge had earned respect from one of the world's most rigorous traditional craft communities. Flying back to Chicago, I reflected on how much had changed since that first rejection email from a venture capital firm 3 years earlier. The platform had grown beyond e-commerce into something resembling a cultural movement, with documentary filmmakers creating mini-series about our artisans, museums hosting exhibitions featuring their work, and universities developing curriculum around traditional craft preservation. The plane encountered turbulence over the Pacific, and I found myself thinking about stability and change, about the delicate balance between preserving tradition and embracing innovation. Artisans Bridge had succeeded precisely because it respected both impulses, honoring ancient techniques while using modern technology to connect craftspeople with appreciative audiences. Carmen was asleep in the seat beside me, her laptop open to a spreadsheet showing projected revenue growth for the next 5 years. Our financial success had allowed us to establish the Artisans Bridge Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provided grants for traditional craft education and cultural preservation projects. We'd already funded 17 apprenticeship programs and 3 documentary projects that captured traditional techniques before they disappeared. Back in Chicago, I found a stack of handwritten letters waiting on my desk. Despite living in a digital age, many of our artisans still preferred to communicate through physical mail, and I made a point of reading every letter personally. Maria Santos, the grandmother from Arizona whose basket weaving had grown into a family business, wrote about her granddaughter's acceptance into art school with a full scholarship. The girl planned to study both traditional and contemporary textile arts, combining ancestral techniques with modern design principles. Jonathan Wright, the woodworker from Ohio, had enclosed photographs of his son's first woodworking project, a simple birdhouse that showed clear signs of inherited talent and careful instruction. Teaching him the same skills my grandfather taught me, he wrote. Thanks to your platform, I can do this full-time now and really pass on what matters. The most surprising letter came from Bradley Morrison, the global craft executive who had tried to acquire us 2 years earlier. He'd left the corporation to start his own company focused on sustainable manufacturing, and he wanted to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. I've had time to think about what you said during our final meeting, he wrote. You were right that some things are worth more than their market value. I'd like to explore ways we might work together to support traditional craftspeople while building responsible business models. That afternoon, I walked through the converted warehouse that now served as Artisans Bridge headquarters. The space buzzed with activity. Customer service representatives helping customers understand the stories behind their purchases, video production staff creating artisan profiles, and logistics coordinators managing shipments to 6 continents. Jenny Patterson had been promoted to Chief Operating Officer, and she'd built a team that shared our commitment to both excellence and authenticity. The company culture we'd developed emphasized careful attention to detail, respect for traditional techniques, and genuine enthusiasm for preserving cultural heritage. Elena, you need to see this, Jenny called from her office. She was watching a live stream from Marcus Thompson's workshop, where he was demonstrating traditional joinery techniques to an online audience of 3,400 viewers from around the world. He started doing these educational sessions on his own initiative, Jenny explained. Viewers can ask questions in real time, and Marcus answers them while he works. It's like having a masterclass with a traditional craftsman, except people from anywhere can participate. The live stream represented everything Artisans Bridge had become, a platform that connected people across geographical and cultural boundaries through shared appreciation for skilled craftsmanship. Marcus wasn't just selling furniture, he was teaching techniques that might otherwise disappear, preserving knowledge that could inspire future generations of woodworkers. That evening, Carmen and I met our mother for dinner at a small Italian restaurant in our old neighborhood. The walls were covered with photographs of families who had been gathering there for decades, a testament to the kind of continuity and tradition that Artisans Bridge celebrated in the craft world. "Your father would be so proud," our mother said, looking at the latest magazine article about the platform's international expansion. "Not just because you've been successful, but because you've honored the values he tried to teach you." Carmen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I owe you an apology I should have given you years ago. When I said you'd never succeed that night, I wasn't really talking about you. I was talking about my own fears of taking risks, of trying something that might fail." "You don't need to apologize anymore," I replied. "What matters is that we found our way to working together." "No, I do need to say this," Carmen continued. "Watching you build Artisans Bridge taught me that real success isn't about climbing someone else's ladder. It's about building something that reflects your own values and makes the world a little better." 3 months later, I received a call that brought the entire journey full circle. Mr. Davidson from First National Bank was on the line, but this time he had a very different kind of proposal. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm calling because the bank's board of directors has approved a new small business incubator program. We want to provide funding and mentorship for entrepreneurs who are building mission-driven companies. Based on your success with Artisans Bridge, we'd like you to serve as a mentor and advisory board member." The irony wasn't lost on me. The same bank where I'd once worried about overdraft fees was now asking me to help other entrepreneurs navigate the challenges of building meaningful businesses. The program would provide seed funding, business development support, and mentorship for startups that prioritize social impact alongside financial returns. "We've identified 12 entrepreneurs who remind us of you when you first started," Mr. Davidson continued. "They have great ideas and genuine passion, but they need guidance from someone who's actually built something significant." I accepted the position immediately. The opportunity to help other dreamers navigate the gap between vision and reality felt like a natural extension of everything Artisans Bridge represented. The first mentorship cohort included a young woman developing a platform for sustainable fashion, a former teacher creating educational games for underserved communities, and a restaurant owner building a network to support immigrant entrepreneurs. Each one reminded me of myself 3 years earlier, passionate, determined, and slightly terrified of the challenges ahead. During our first group meeting, I shared the story of Artisans Bridge, including the failures that preceded it and the family dynamics that had both motivated and complicated the journey. I talked about the importance of persistence, the value of authentic partnerships, and the necessity of staying true to core values, even when financial pressures mounted. "The most important thing I can tell you," I said, "is that success isn't just about building a profitable business. It's about creating something that will still matter 10 years from now, something that makes the world a little better than you found it." One of the entrepreneurs, a soft-spoken man named David Park who was developing technology to help senior citizens age in place, raised his hand. "How do you know if you're building something that will last?" I thought about Master Yamamoto's pottery, about Marcus Thompson's furniture, about Isabella Martinez's textiles that connected contemporary customers with ancestral traditions. If what you're building honors something timeless, human dignity, cultural heritage, authentic craftsmanship, genuine community, then it will last. The specific technology might change, but the underlying values will endure. 6 months into the mentorship program, 3 of the 12 startups had secured additional funding, 2 had been featured in national publications, and all of them had refined their business models based on lessons learned from more experienced entrepreneurs. The success of the program led to speaking invitations at universities, entrepreneurship conferences, and cultural organizations. I found myself sharing the Artisans Bridge story, with audiences who were hungry for examples of businesses that prioritized purpose alongside profit. At a conference in Seattle, a young woman approached me after my presentation. She was starting a platform to connect urban consumers with small-scale farmers, and she'd been struggling with questions about scaling without compromising her mission. "Everyone keeps telling me I need to choose between staying small and authentic or growing big and profitable," she said. "How did you manage to do both?" "By redefining what growth means," I replied. "Instead of measuring success just by revenue or number of users, we tracked things like artisan income stability, traditional techniques preserved, and customer satisfaction with the stories behind their purchases. When you optimize for the right metrics, profitable growth becomes a natural result of doing meaningful work." Standing there in the convention center, surrounded by entrepreneurs and investors discussing the future of business, I realized that Artisans Bridge had become more than a successful company. It had become proof that commerce could serve culture, that technology could preserve tradition, and that family conflict could transform into genuine partnership. The platform now supports over 1,200 artisans across 31 countries, processes more than $8 million in annual sales, and has documented 394 traditional craft techniques for preservation. But the numbers that matter most are harder to quantify. The pride in Marcus Thompson's voice when he talks about his son learning woodworking. The excitement in Isabella Martinez's emails about her granddaughter's acceptance into art school. The gratitude in letters from customers who found unique pieces that connect them to stories and traditions they never knew existed. Carmen and I still work together every day, but our relationship has evolved far beyond business partnership. We've learned to leverage our different strengths while respecting each other's perspectives, creating something stronger than either of us could have built alone. The sister who once said I'd never succeed now introduces me at industry conferences as the entrepreneur who proved that mission-driven business isn't just possible, it's profitable. But more importantly, she's become the kind of person our father would have admired. Someone who uses her talents to build rather than simply to acquire. Last week, we received news that Artisans Bridge had been selected as the official craft marketplace partner for UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage Program. The partnership will help us connect with traditional craftspeople in regions where ancient techniques are most at risk of disappearing, providing them with global markets while ensuring their knowledge is preserved for future generations. As I write this, sitting in the office that overlooks the same Chicago skyline where this journey began, I can see the lake where Carmen and I walked after rejecting the Global Craft acquisition. The decision that seemed financially insane at the time had led to something far more valuable than money. The knowledge that we'd built something worthy of the trust placed in us by hundreds of artisans and thousands of customers who believed in preserving authentic craftsmanship. The platform continues to grow, but its core mission remains unchanged, honoring the irreplaceable value of human creativity while connecting traditional craftspeople with modern markets. Every order processed, every artisan supported, and every traditional technique preserved represents a small victory against the homogenization that threatens to make everything identical and disposable. Sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing new artisan applications or planning expansion into new regions, I think about that dinner conversation where Carmen challenged me to name one thing I'd ever succeeded at. Now I know the answer wasn't about any single achievement. It was about the willingness to keep trying, to learn from failure, and to build something that honors the best of human creativity. The journey from that humiliating family dinner to UNESCO partnership has taught me that success isn't measured by proving other people wrong. It's measured by staying true to values that matter, by building something that serves others, and by creating opportunities for meaningful work that preserves what's precious about human culture. And in the end, the sister who said I'd never succeed became the partner who helped me succeed beyond anything either of us had imagined possible. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.